The battlefield was silent now, except for the distant crackling of fire and the low hum of Federation drones scanning the ruins. Smoke curled into the dark sky, and broken buildings stood like the bones of a dead giant. The war between the United Earth Federation and the Galactic Dominion had left the city in ruins. Sergeant Daniel Carter moved carefully through the rubble, his rifle raised, his eyes scanning for survivors. His armor was scratched, his energy shield flickering from recent combat. He was the last of his unit still standing, and he had one mission left: search for any remaining Dominion forces and eliminate the threat. But as he stepped into a half-collapsed building, he heard something unexpected. A soft whimper. Carter's body tensed. He turned his rifle towards the sound, his finger resting on the trigger. His visor scanned the shadows, highlighting a small figure curled up behind a broken table. It was not a soldier. It was a girl, an alien girl. She had deep violet skin, glowing silver eyes, and delicate ridges running down the sides of her face. Her clothes were torn, her hands clutched her knees, and her whole body trembled. Carter lowered his weapon slightly. She was young, maybe 14 or 15 in human years. She looked weak, scared. She wasn't a threat. But when Carter took a slow step forward, the girl shivered violently. Her glowing eyes widened in terror. She pressed herself against the wall as if she expected him to strike her down. Carter sighed. She thinks I'm going to kill her. He knew why. The Dominion had always painted humans as monsters, unstoppable warriors who lived only for war. In the stories they told, humans didn't show mercy. Humans didn't hesitate. Carter knelt down slowly, keeping his rifle at his side. He reached into his medical kit and pulled out a small auto-healer. The device hummed to life, glowing faint blue. He held it up, making sure she could see it. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The girl didn't understand his words, but she flinched at his voice. He could see her thinking, deciding whether to run or stay still. Carter carefully placed the auto-healer on the ground between them and backed away. He gestured towards her bleeding leg, and then to the device. The girl's breathing was ragged. Her hands clutched her torn sleeve. Her eyes darted between the healer and Carter's face. Then, very slowly, she reached for it. Carter didn't move. He watched as she picked it up, hesitating before pressing it to her wound. The device beeped, sealing the injury. For the first time, she looked at him without pure fear, just confusion. Carter gave her a small nod. "See, not a monster." But the girl still didn't speak. She still wasn't sure. And Carter knew this was just the beginning. Zyra and Carter moved quickly through the underground tunnels, their footsteps barely making a sound. The Dominion soldiers were still searching above, their voices distant but growing closer. Carter checked his wrist display. The Federation safe zone was still far. Too far. If the Dominion kept hunting them, they wouldn't make it in time. Zyra noticed his tense expression. "Problem?" she asked, using the human word she had learned. Carter hesitated, then nodded. "They're not giving up." Zyra's claws curled slightly. She knew what that meant. The Dominion had marked them as high-priority targets. They wouldn't stop until both of them were dead. She had to make a choice. After a few minutes, they reached an exit, a metal grate leading back to the surface. Carter carefully removed it and peeked outside. The street was quiet, too quiet. Zyra stepped up beside him. Her sharp eyes scanned the area. Something wasn't right. Then, movement. A Dominion patrol. 4 soldiers, armed, alert. Carter swore under his breath. He pulled back into the tunnel, pressing his back against the wall. "We can't fight them all," he muttered. Zyra understood his tone. Danger. No escape. She took a deep breath. Then she made her decision. "I go," she whispered. Carter frowned. "What?" "I'd make distraction." She pointed toward the patrol. "You go safe." Carter's expression hardened. "No way." Zyra's heart pounded. She didn't expect him to refuse so quickly. Any Dominion soldier would have let her go without hesitation. But Carter, he cared. "This my fight," she insisted. "They hunt me. You escape." Carter shook his head. "I don't leave people behind." Zyra was stunned. People. Not alien. Not enemy. People. She swallowed hard. "But I slow you." Carter exhaled sharply, his gaze locking onto hers. "No. We survive together." Zyra's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. For her whole life, she had been told that humans were monsters, that they were cruel and selfish. But this human, he was willing to die for her. The Dominion soldiers moved closer. They had seconds to act. Carter gritted his teeth. Then he pulled out a small grenade, a flashbang. He pointed toward an old supply crate near the patrol. "We do this my way," he said. Zyra nodded. "Your way." Carter pulled the pin and threw the grenade. A blinding flash, a deafening bang. The Dominion soldiers stumbled, blinded. Carter grabbed Syrah's wrist. "Run." They sprinted across the open street, dodging between wrecked vehicles. Behind them, the soldiers shouted in confusion. They didn't stop. They didn't look back. Because now, for the first time, Zyra wasn't just running to survive. She was running to live. Zyra's legs felt weak as she followed Carter through the ruins. The battle was over, but her mind was still trapped in the moment. The human soldier had fought for her. He had killed his enemies. Not for conquest, not for bloodlust, but to protect her. Why? Dominion soldiers didn't protect the weak. They didn't fight for anyone but themselves. But Carter had shielded her with his own body, taking fire meant for her. Her hands clenched. This was not how humans were supposed to be. Carter moved ahead, scanning the area. His rifle was ready, his armor scratched from battle. He kept his pace steady but not too fast. He was making sure she could keep up. "Stay close," he murmured. Zyra didn't understand the words, but she understood the meaning. She followed. The city was quiet now, the distant hum of Dominion patrol ships searching for survivors. Carter led Zyra through the remains of what had once been a marketplace. Broken stalls, shattered glass, and burned-out vehicles lined the streets. Zyra's eyes lingered on the bodies, both human and Dominion. The war had taken everything from them. Why were they even fighting? Carter suddenly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. Zyra froze. He crouched low, pointing towards an alleyway. Zyra peeked around the corner and her heart stopped. A Dominion hunter drone hovered in the street, scanning the area with its red glowing sensors. These machines were programmed to kill anything that moved. Carter tapped his helmet, scanning the drone's pattern. One weak spot, the power core at the base. He motioned for Zyra to stay hidden, then silently moved forward, sticking to the shadows. His footsteps were light, controlled. Zyra's breath caught in her throat. No Dominion soldier would ever risk their life for someone like her. But this human was walking straight into danger, again. The drone turned. Carter leaped forward, grabbing onto a fallen steel beam. With precise aim, he fired one clean shot into the drone's power core. A spark. A loud explosion. The machine collapsed, burning. Zyra's eyes widened. How? Dominion soldiers relied on squads and overwhelming firepower, but Carter, he fought alone, fast, precise, like a ghost in the shadows. He turned back and gave her a small nod. Clear. She didn't understand his words, but she understood him. For the first time in her life, she realized something. She was safer with a human than with her own people. Her world was breaking apart. Everything she had been taught. All lies. Carter moved forward, expecting her to follow. She did, but now she wasn't just following. She was making a choice that would change everything. Zyra followed Carter through the ruins, her heart still racing from the battle. The air smelled of smoke and burned metal, and the eerie silence of the city felt heavier with every step. She should have been afraid, but somehow she wasn't. The human soldier moved ahead, scanning every corner, his rifle always ready. He was fast, efficient, a survivor. Zaira had seen Dominion elites fight, but Carter, he fought with purpose, not just orders. She had no reason to trust him, yet she did. Carter stopped at an abandoned shop, its walls cracked from the explosions. He motioned for Zaira to enter. She hesitated, then stepped inside. The place was dark, filled with broken shelves and shattered glass. Carter knelt down and pulled out a small emergency ration pack from his belt. He unwrapped it, took a bite, then held it out to her. Zaira stared at the food. Her stomach ached from hunger, but her mind screamed trap. Dominion soldiers never shared food. They took what they wanted and left the weak behind. But Carter wasn't like them. Slowly, she reached out and took the ration. Their fingers brushed for a second, and she flinched. His hand was warm, human, real. She took a small bite. It was dry and tasteless, but it filled her stomach. Carter gave a slight smile. Not great, huh? She didn't understand his words, but his tone was calm, not a threat. For the first time, Zaira felt something strange. Safety. After a few minutes, Carter pulled out a holodevice from his wrist console. A small holographic map appeared, showing their location and the nearest Federation outpost. Zaira's eyes widened. She recognized that symbol. The Federation, the enemy of the Dominion. Carter pointed at the blinking blue dot. Safe zone, he said. Zaira frowned. Safe. The word was unfamiliar on her tongue. Carter nodded. Safe. She hesitated. The Dominion had always told her that humans were brutal conquerors, but Carter had protected her, given her food, treated her wounds. She pointed at him. Human. Carter raised an eyebrow, then nodded. Yeah, human. Zaira thought for a moment, then placed a hand on her chest. Carry. Carter's face softened. Carry. He repeated the word carefully, like it meant something important. Zaira felt an unexpected warmth inside her chest. No Dominion soldier had ever spoken her name with such respect. She wasn't just some alien. To him, she was a person. She took a deep breath, looked at the map, then at Carter. And for the first time, she wanted to go with him. She didn't know where this path would lead. But one thing was clear. She was no longer afraid. Zaira clutched the auto-healer in her trembling hands, her silver eyes flickering between the strange human soldier and the now-sealed wound on her leg. The small device had worked, just as it did in Dominion medical kits. But how? Was this a trick? She had always been told that humans were ruthless. They were bred for war, their hearts cold, their minds filled only with violence. But this one, he had helped her. Sergeant Daniel Carter stayed still, watching the alien girl carefully. He could see the confusion in her face, the war inside her mind. Fear still held her in its grip, but a tiny spark of curiosity flickered in her gaze. He decided to take a chance. Slowly, Carter unhooked his helmet, pulling it off to reveal his face. He knew that seeing his human features might help. The Dominion propaganda always painted humans as faceless, armored demons. Maybe if she saw he was just a man, it would change something. Zaira's breath hitched. She had never seen a human's face up close before. His skin was lighter than hers, rougher, with scars along his cheek and forehead. His eyes were strange, not glowing, not sharp like a predator's, but deep and full of something she couldn't understand. Carter placed his helmet on the ground and raised his hands, palms open. A universal sign of peace. It's okay, he said softly. She flinched at his voice, but didn't look away. Carter sighed. She doesn't understand my words. But body language, gestures, these were things all species knew. He pointed at himself. Carter, he said slowly. Zaira's fingers twitched. She hesitated before pointing at herself, barely whispering, Tyra. Carter smiled. Progress. He carefully unhooked his water flask from his belt. taking a small sip to show it was safe before holding it out. Tyra's throat was dry. She wanted to take it. But what if it was poisoned? Still, her thirst won over her fear. Slowly, she reached for the flask, her small hands brushing against Carter's fingers. She tensed, but took a sip. The water was clean, cool. For the first time, she looked at him without pure terror, just doubt. But just as the fragile moment of trust started to form, a loud metallic thud echoed through the ruined building. Syra froze. Her eyes went wide with terror. Carter's body snapped into combat mode instantly. He grabbed his rifle and pulled Syra behind him. Heavy footsteps. The sound of shifting armor. Carter's visor flashed red. Hostiles detected. A Dominion patrol was near. Syra's heart pounded. If the soldiers found her with a human, they would assume she was a traitor. And the Dominion did not forgive traitors. Carter glanced at her, her hands clenched into fists. Her breathing was sharp and fast. She was more afraid of them than she was of him. Carter gritted his teeth and whispered, "Stay quiet." Then he raised his rifle. The fight was coming. Syra pressed herself against the broken wall, her heart pounding like a war drum. The heavy boots of the Dominion soldiers grew louder. They were close, too close. Carter's grip tightened on his rifle. His visor displayed movement behind the collapsed doorway. 3 hostiles, armed, alert. He had faced worse odds before, but this time he wasn't alone. The alien girl was here, defenseless. A deep robotic voice echoed through the ruined building. "Search for survivors. Kill any humans on sight." Syra clenched her fists. She knew that voice. Captain Varric. He was a ruthless commander, one who believed mercy was weakness. If he found her with Carter, he wouldn't ask questions. He would execute her. She felt a gentle push on her shoulder. Carter. He gestured for her to move back, further into the shadows. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp, focused. He was going to fight. Syra's breath hitched. It didn't make sense. Why was he protecting her? A Dominion soldier stepped inside, his plasma rifle raised. His dark red armor glowed under the broken ceiling. His eyes scanned the room. Carter moved fast. One shot. Silent. Precise. The soldier collapsed before he could react. But it was too late. The noise had alerted the others. A burst of plasma fire ripped through the wall. Carter tackled Syra to the ground, shielding her with his own body as the energy bolts exploded around them. The heat singed his armor, but he didn't flinch. Syra gasped. No human had ever protected her kind like this. Not even her own people shielded the weak. Carter rolled behind cover and fired back. 1 shot, 2 shots. Another soldier fell. The last one. Captain Varric roared in anger. "Cowardly human. Come out and die with honor." Carter smirked. "Honor? You're the one hiding behind lies." Varric snarled and charged. Carter didn't hesitate. He moved fast, dodging Varric's first attack and slamming the butt of his rifle into the alien's helmet. Varric stumbled but recovered quickly, pulling out a plasma blade. Syra's hands trembled. She had seen Varric kill dozens of enemies with that weapon. No human should be able to survive a fight against him. But Carter wasn't like the others. With expert precision, Carter blocked the blade using his armored forearm, then countered with a hard punch to Varric's throat. The Dominion captain choked, his stance faltering. One final shot. Varric collapsed. Silence filled the room. Carter exhaled, lowering his rifle. His armor was scratched, his breathing heavy, but he was still standing. He turned to Syra. "We need to move." Syra didn't answer. She just stared at him. This human had fought for her, protected her, killed his enemies, not for power, not for pleasure, but to keep her safe. Everything she had been taught about humans was a lie. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Syra's legs burned as she sprinted behind Carter, dodging broken debris and shattered glass. The Dominion was close, Too close. Their voices echoed through the ruins, orders sharp and merciless. Find the human. Kill the traitor. Her heart pounded. They were hunting her too. Carter led her through a collapsed bridge, dropping down into an underground passage. The air was thick with dust, the tunnel dark and cold. Zyra's breathing was heavy, but Carter stayed calm, focused. He activated his wrist device, a small holographic map glowing on his arm. The safe zone was still miles away. Zyra swallowed hard. They wouldn't make it if the Dominion kept chasing them. Carter turned to her, speaking in a low voice. We can't outrun them. We need to hide. Zyra didn't understand all the words, but she caught the meaning. Hide. Wait. Survive. She nodded. They moved deeper into the tunnel, stepping carefully over fallen pipes and broken metal. The Dominion's footsteps grew louder above them. Zyra tensed. If they were caught now, they wouldn't get another chance. Carter pointed to an old maintenance shaft and climbed inside, pulling Zyra with him. They crouched low, hidden in the shadows. Silence. Then, heavy boots. Zyra held her breath. A Dominion soldier stood just outside the shaft, scanning the area with a red-tinted visor. His plasma rifle hummed softly. She felt Carter shift beside her. His hands clenched around his weapon. If the soldier turned, Carter would have to kill him. But one shot would bring the whole patrol. They had to stay still. Zyra could hear her own heartbeat. Loud, fast, terrified. The soldier took a step forward, then another, closer. Zyra's claws dug into her palms. If he looked inside, it was over. Then, a sudden explosion in the distance. The soldier paused, then turned away, speaking into his communicator. Sector 7 compromised. Moving to assist. He ran off. Zyra let out a slow, shaking breath. They were safe. For now. After a few minutes, Carter tapped her shoulder. We need to keep moving. Zyra looked at him, really looked at him. This human had saved her again and again. He had protected her, fought for her. He had risked his life when he didn't have to. She thought of her own people. Would the Dominion have done the same? No. She didn't know why, but deep inside, she trusted Carter, more than she had ever trusted her own commanders. She nodded firmly. We go. Carter gave a small, approving smile. For the first time, they weren't just running together. They were surviving together. And Zyra knew her life would never be the same again. Zyra and Carter ran through the broken city, their breaths sharp and fast. The Dominion soldiers were behind them, recovering from the flashbang. Their shouts filled the air. Find them. Don't let them escape. Carter's grip on Zyra's wrist was tight but firm. He wasn't pulling her. He was guiding her, making sure she kept up. The Federation safe zone was close now. Less than a mile. But the Dominion wouldn't let them reach it. Blaster shots tore through the air. Zyra gasped as a plasma bolt burned past her shoulder, searing the wall beside her. The enemy was too close. Carter turned sharply, leading her into an abandoned skyscraper. They ran up the crumbling stairs, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Zyra's legs ached, but she didn't stop. She wouldn't stop. The Dominion soldiers followed, their boots heavy, their weapons charged. Carter looked back. Keep going. They reached the roof. The city stretched below them, and beyond the ruins, the glowing lights of the Federation base. Safety. Zyra's chest tightened. So close. But then, the Dominion leader stepped onto the roof. He was taller than the other soldiers, his armor dark and battle-worn. His red visor glowed, his plasma rifle aimed directly at Carter. Carter raised his weapon, but he was outnumbered. More Dominion troops poured onto the rooftop, surrounding them. There was no escape. The leader took a step forward, his voice cold. Human, he growled. You've run far enough. Carter didn't move. His expression was calm, but Sarah could see the tension in his stance. He was ready to fight, even if it was hopeless. The leader turned to Zyra. His voice became mocking. Traitor. Zyra flinched. This was it, the moment she had been running from. Her people, the Dominion, saw her as nothing but a disgrace, a coward, a traitor. She looked at Carter, and she made her choice. She stepped forward, raising her chin. Not afraid, not weak. No, she said firmly. Not traitor. Free. The leader growled. Then you will die as one. He raised his weapon. Zyra's heart stopped. Then, a roar of engines. Federation gunships burst through the clouds, their lights blinding. Soldiers rappelled down, weapons ready. Federation forces. A voice echoed through a speaker. Drop your weapons or be fired upon. The Dominion leader hesitated. Carter seized the moment. He tackled Zyra, both of them rolling as plasma fire erupted. The rooftop became chaos, explosions, gunfire. The Dominion retreating. Carter pulled Zyra up, his voice urgent. We have to jump. She looked down. A Federation dropship hovered just below the rooftop. Zyra swallowed hard. Then, she took his hand and jumped. Zyra's heart pounded as she and Carter fell through the air, the wind roaring in her ears. The Federation dropship was just below them, its ramp open. Carter held her hand tight. He wasn't letting go. Zyra braced herself, and then they landed. The impact was rough, but strong hands pulled them inside. Federation soldiers. Their armor was different from the Dominion's, sleek, advanced, but not oppressive. The dropship lifted, speeding away from the battle. They were safe. Zyra collapsed against the cold metal floor, her chest rising and falling. She turned to Carter. He grinned at her. Told you we'd make it. She didn't understand all his words, but she understood his smile. They had won. The Federation base was a massive structure of steel and light, standing strong against the ruined world. When the dropship landed, soldiers rushed forward, weapons ready, until they saw Carter. Lieutenant Carter. A commanding officer stepped forward. We thought you were dead. Carter smirked. Not yet. Then the officer's gaze fell on Zyra. His expression hardened. And the alien. Zyra tensed. She had just escaped one enemy. Was she about to face another? Carter stood beside her. His voice was firm. She's with me. Silence. The officer studied her for a long moment. Zyra didn't look away. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Finally, the officer nodded. Understood. Later, inside the base, Zyra sat beside Carter in a quiet room. He handed her a small metal cup. She sniffed it. Warm. Strange. What? She asked. Carter chuckled. It's tea. Try it. Zyra hesitated, then took a sip. Bitter, but not bad. She looked at him. What now? Carter leaned back, his expression thoughtful. That's up to you. Up to her. The words felt strange. For her whole life, the Dominion had decided everything. Where she lived, what she did, who she was. Now, she was free. Zyra looked at her hands. No chains, no orders, only possibilities. She smiled. Just a little. I stay. Carter grinned. Good. I could use a partner. A partner. Not an enemy. Not a soldier. Not a traitor. A partner. Zyra exhaled slowly. She didn't know what the future held. There would be dangers, battles, struggles, but she wouldn't face them alone. For the first time in her life, she had a choice, and she chose to live. Zyra followed Carter through the ruined streets, her sharp eyes scanning the dark alleys. The city was silent, but she knew they were being watched. The Dominion never left survivors. If they realized she was with a human, they would hunt her too. Carter moved with quiet precision, his rifle ready. He checked his map again. The Federation safe zone was still far. Too far. Zyra swallowed. Would they even make it? A low hum filled the air. Carter froze. Kyra's ears twitched. Then, the sharp whine of a Dominion scout drone. It hovered above the street, its red sensors scanning for life signs. Zyra's breath caught in her throat. If the drone detected them, an entire Dominion strike force would arrive within minutes. Carter grabbed her wrist and pulled her into a nearby collapsed building. They pressed against the cracked wall, staying completely still. The drone's sensors swept over the area. Zyra's heart pounded. Carter carefully reached into his belt and pulled out a disruptor device. He tapped a button, and the device began to emit a low-frequency pulse, a trick to confuse scanners. The drone hesitated. A long pause. Then, with a mechanical chirp, it moved on. Zyra exhaled shakily. They had survived. For now, Carter signaled for her to move. They sprinted through the ruined city, keeping low. Zyra's legs ached, but she pushed forward. She was no longer just following him. She was running for her life. After a few minutes, they found shelter inside an abandoned transport station. Carter secured the entrance with debris and checked his weapon. He had only a few energy rounds left. Zyra watched him, curiosity growing inside her. Why was he still helping her? She pointed at him. Human. Why? Carter looked up, raising an eyebrow. She tried again. Why? Help. Carter was silent for a moment. Then he sighed and tapped his chest. Because it's the right thing to do. Zyra didn't understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. He wasn't doing this for orders. He wasn't doing this for war. He was doing it because he wanted to. That didn't make sense. The Dominion never did things without reason. Humans were supposed to be ruthless, but this human had risked his life for her. Zyra clenched her fists. Maybe everything she had been told was a lie. Suddenly, a distant explosion rocked the ground. A deep, growling voice echoed through the ruined streets. Find the human. Kill him on sight. Carter tensed. Zyra's blood ran cold. The Dominion was closing in. Carter grabbed her wrist again, his voice firm. We need to move. Now. Zyra didn't hesitate. She ran. And this time, she wasn't just running to survive. She was running with him.